President of the Philippines. May I now call on May I now call on Mr. Edward Chang, President of the Korean Chamber of Commerce of the Philippines, to introduce our keynote speaker.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We are very fortunate to have with us today a man who exemplifies integrity and competence in all aspects of his life. A son of Iloilo, he finished the Bachelor of Art and Bachelor of Laws at UP Diliman and placed third in the 1969 bar examination. He holds the distinction of serving in 3 cabinet positions, which were Labor Secretary, Justice Secretary, and Executive Secretary in the Cory Aquino and Fidel V. Ramos administrations. Elected Senate in 1995 and re-elected in 2001 and 2010, he served as Senate President for a total of 5 years and 7 months, making him the longest-serving Senate President since Congress was re-established in 1987. In July 2013, he was elected for the 4th time as Senate President. As legislator, he has shown countless times his brilliance while debating with his colleagues on the floor, as well as his remarkable persistence in pursuing reforms. He is also known for his unbending principle and moral courage in the face of political adversities. Because of his unwavering commitment to human development, he was initiated and supported various programs and projects that are meant to raise the quality of life of our people. Ladies and gentlemen, a reformer, a visionary, a legislator par excellence, the Senate President Franklin M. Drilon. Let's welcome him to the podium with our big hands.
Thank you very much, Edward, for your very kind remarks. Let me greet everyone a pleasant good afternoon. I won't cite specific personages, and it may take us another hour. Excellencies and members of the Diplomatic Corps, ladies and gentlemen, business leaders, a pleasant good afternoon to all of you. It is truly an honor and privilege to speak before the movers and shakers of the Philippine economy during this fourth Arangkada Philippines Anniversary Forum. I congratulate the Joint Foreign Chambers of the Philippines for another successful holding of this event. This afternoon, you have chosen a very impressive theme, Invest Now for Inclusive Growth, which totally captured the essence of what we in government has been doing for almost 5 years. In Bloomberg's list of 20 fastest growing economies, the Philippines placed second after China and much ahead of its ASEAN neighbors. In 2015 Index of the Economic Freedom, an annual guide published by the Wall Street Journal and the Heritage Foundation, the Philippines ranked 76th in the world and 13th in the Asia-Pacific region with a score of 62.2. The US-based JP Morgan sees the Philippines economy expanding by 6.4% this year, while British banking giant Standard Chartered forecasts growth this year at 6%. Meanwhile, the IMF raised its growth projection for the Philippine economy for 2015 and 2016 to 6.6% and 6.4% respectively. As Senate President, I find it truly heartwarming and fulfilling that these rating agencies, financial institutions, and business community attribute the rosy economic picture to the government's relentless effort to fortify our institutions, encourage efficient government spending, reduce debt, improve fiscal management, and promote transparency and accountability. The reforms that have been undertaken, anchored on the platform of good governance, spawned a culture of integrity in public service, gave birth to a new brand of politics, addressed the structural weaknesses in the economy, and improved human capital. Today, with modesty, we can say that our governance agenda is raking in dividends. The momentum continues as Congress aggressively pushes for a number of good governance and public accountability measures anchored on the rule of law. We will continue pursuing our reform agenda in the remaining term of the 16th Congress. Early in the 16th Congress, the Senate passed its version of the Freedom Information Act to implement a policy of full public disclosure of all government transactions involving public interest with appropriate safeguards to protect national security and national interest. Pending before the President today is the measure which will amend the Sandigan Bayan Law and strengthen the structural capability of the Sandigan or the Graft Court, and thereby empowers such court to effectively and speedily resolve cases against erring government officials and employees. The proposed measure will add 2 divisions to the Anti-Graft Court, increasing the number of justices from 15 to 21. We expect this law to be passed, to be signed by the President next month, or by the end of the month, and it should be effective by June. We are working on the Customs and Tariff Modernization Act to enhance trade facilitation for the legitimate trade community by promoting a full automation of customs procedures and by strengthening the Bureau of Customs Risk Management, Revenue Collection, and Enforcement systems. We will make this law effective within this year. With this, I am certain that we can make a dent in smuggling, which in 2013 deprived our government of an estimated 200 billion pesos in revenues. We recognize that the 2 most important problems right now are the very high poverty incidence and joblessness. We have to create a business climate that will bring in massive investments and generate much-needed employment for our people. it is crucial that government ramp up spending to provide the vital infrastructure projects that will sustain economic growth. We must strengthen the manufacturing and agricultural sectors, which employ most of our people in the lower rung of the economic ladder. More importantly, we will ensure that every Filipino will enjoy the fruits of development and that no Filipino man, woman, or child will be left behind. On the other hand, we have been preparing for the inauguration of the Asean Economic Community this year, which will cause a free flow of goods, services, capital, and labor among ASEAN nations. Thus, we passed a law last year that allowed the full entry of foreign banks. Foreign investors can now look to their trusted, reputable foreign banks to facilitate transactions in the country. With this law, we hope to encourage the inflow of foreign capital and other foreign direct investments, not only in the banking industry, but in the other industries as well. Moreover, we hope to see the Philippines ease into the integrated financial and capital markets in the region. I must confess that this law was prompted by the representations made by the Japanese banks that they be given better access to our system. In addition to the liberalization measures as key to attract foreign investments, we have steered the passage of the law that would improve the ease of doing business, such as the Go Negocio Act. Your Congress has been working on a legislative agenda that provides our roadmap for accelerated, sustainable, and inclusive growth. Your Senate has enacted an antitrust law, the Fair Competition Act. Once passed by the House of Representatives, the measure will promote economic efficiency in trade, industry, and commerce through the prohibition of anti-competitive agreements, abuse of dominant position, and anti-competitive mergers. The passage of the competition law, which we expect by June of this year, will ultimately bring about a dynamic, sustainable, inclusive economic growth and national progress. Your Senate also passed legislation that will allow foreign vessels to transship foreign cargoes between Philippine ports and allow importers and exporters to co-load in foreign ships going in and out of the Philippines. This measure will definitely open the market to competition, bring down transport costs by sea, and enable the country to fully utilize the supply chains for products. We expect this amendment to the cabotage law to be effective by June of this year. This month, we will also start the debate on the passage of a stronger enabling law for the public-private sector partnership. Just this morning, our committee in the Senate heard this bill in committee hearing. This proposed measure will provide the most appropriate framework to mobilize the private sector to finance, design, construct, and operate and maintain infrastructure projects and services. We intend to pass a measure that will establish institutions that will support our moves toward liberalization. We will create 2 new offices, a Philippine Trade Representative Office, which will serve as the country's central agency tasked to formulate a cohesive trade strategy, and second, a Department of Information and Communication Technology to support the development of our ICT system and put us at par with Asian economies which have cabinet-level departments for information and communication technology. This measure will be sponsored on the floor by Senator Ralph Recto in about a week's time, just before we close our session, and we expect to pass this measure by June. We are working to amend the BSP Charter to effectively respond to the challenges and innovations of a globalized economy by increasing capitalization to 200 billion, among others. A little bit high, but as a starting point, yes, we placed a proposed increase of 200 billion in the capitalization. noting, for example, that under the BSP Charter, a capitalization of 50 billion was only subscribed to by the national government only recently, and sourcing the money from the controversial DAP. But it is there, we have subscribed to it. The proposed measure further seeks to strengthen the Bangko Central's monetary stability function by restoring its authority to issue negotiable certificates of indebtedness. Let me address the concern raised by the proposed Tax Incentive Monitoring and Transparency Act, or the TIMTA. I have read in today's business pages that the joint foreign chambers are worried that the TIMTA, which seeks to include the amount of fiscal incentives granted to firms in the annual appropriation law, will affect the country's competitiveness. This reading, I must assert, is unfounded because it is premised on that we will provide, that it will be included in the General Appropriations Act. No, it will not be included in the General Appropriations Act, so that the incentives granted will not be affected at all. By the way, this bill will be sponsored by Senator Angara this afternoon. It will be sponsored this afternoon in the Senate floor. Now, what is the objective of the law? It is to establish a system for the administration, implementation, and monitoring of tax incentive granted by law to registered business entities and qualified private individuals and corporations, and administered by the investment promotion agencies, or IPAs, and other government agencies to improve transparency with respect to such incentive. It is only a reporting requirement for purposes of transparency. What are some of the key provisions? It is the creation of a tax incentive information section in the annual budget of expenditure and sources of financing, or BESF. It will not be in the General Appropriations Act. And being included there, the information on the tax incentives administered by the investment promotion agencies. It will establish a tax incentive tracking program for all tax incentives administered. It will establish a reportorial process to the President and to Congress as part of the annual budget for expenditures and sources of financing. No budget account will be created. It is a measure for purposes of ensuring transparency. In fact, it is already in the 2012 budget of expenditure and sources of fund, which listed the actual amount of tax expenditures as a result of the incentives granted by the investment promoting agencies. The records show that in 2012, the actual tax expenditure as a result of the incentives granted by our investment promotion agencies amounted to 159,885 million pesos. Again, this is just a reporting requirement for purposes of transparency. In 2013, the expected tax expenditure is about 161.5 billion. In 2014, 164.5 billion. And therefore, I wish to assure everyone that we will not touch the incentives being granted. It is just for transparency. It is for public information as to what tax expenditures we are doing in order to provide the incentive for our businessmen. It will bolster transparency and accountability in the present system of granting fiscal incentives. And under the proposed measure, a tax incentive information will be annually published reflecting the actual and projected incentives granted to registered business enterprises and qualified private individuals. So again, let me assure you that nothing in this law will be construed to diminish the incentives that the IPAs may grant pursuant to their charter or existing laws. It is nothing more but a transparency provision. Your Congress also intends to review and possibly enact the proposed rationalization of mining revenues, to introduce a straightforward fiscal regime and revenue arrangement between the government and the mining sector, taking into consideration the role of the government as owners of minerals and the impacts of the mining activities on the environment and the community. Yesterday, we passed on third reading the joint resolution that will allow the President to address any potential power shortage during the summer. We expect that by this afternoon, we should be able to ratify the bicameral conference committee report on the disagreeing provision between the two versions of the House and the Senate. Apart from bringing a solution to the foreseen summer outages in 2015, the passage of the resolution is part of the effort to establish a clear energy agenda and address the growing concern over the perceived inability of the country's power sector to keep up with the growing demand that is intricately related to the Philippine economy's potential economic growth. Of course, I cannot leave this podium without touching on the Mama Sapano incident and the Bangsamoro Basic Law. As we are all aware, last January 25, 2015, the nation was shaken by the event of the Mama Sapano incident that took the lives of 44 members of the Philippine National Police Special Action Force. We lost 44 lives, but we must not allow peace to be the 45th casualty in this episode. Now more than ever, we must not stray away from the path of peace. Rest assured that Congress has more than ever become more resolute and determined to meet its ultimate goal, that is to put an end to decades-old conflict in Mindanao. We have set the deadline on ourselves, a new deadline of June, within which to pass a Bangsamoro law that is consistent with the Constitution and the intent and the interest of our people. Ladies and gentlemen, it is with confidence that I face the joint foreign chambers this afternoon, confident that we can pass the reform measures that we have outlined for ourselves. And that is because if you saw the front pages of the Inquirer today, you saw me with Speaker Belmonte and the leadership of both houses. We do this on a monthly basis, so that on a monthly basis, we monitor the progress of critical legislation, including all of those that I have mentioned. We have our own, we have a list of priority legislative measures, which are principally based also on the LEDAC listing. But we do take certain positions independent of LEDAC, most prominent of which is the formation of the Department of Information Communication Technology. We commit to you that this law will pass, and we will present it to the President. We know that the President has certain reservations on this, but we will pass it in Congress. We will present it to the President for his approval or disapproval. That is the best we can do, but we know that we need a DICT to put us at par with many of our economies in Southeast Asia. So, my dear friends, our doors are always open to consultation. You have gone to my office or requested for meetings. I can assure you that we will have an open mind on this. One of the most difficult bills that we will tackle is the rationalization of fiscal incentive. This bill has been pending, even I think during the time of Monde Rosario here. And I think during the first term of Cesar Purisima, this was also tackled, but it could not get very far, as we understand it. But we will again give it our best shot. We will try to come up with a rationalized fiscal incentive which will take the interest of both the public and the private sector, particularly the foreign chambers, into account. But we must come up with a measure that will rationalize our fiscal incentive, which has been constantly reviewed but never acted upon. So, my dear friends, let me thank you for this opportunity to once more share our what we've been doing in Congress. Let me assure you that it is a working Congress, a listening Congress, who always would have our national interest uppermost in our agenda. Thank you very much, and a pleasant good afternoon.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Senate President Drilon. Ladies and gentlemen, lunch will now be served. Bon appetit.
What do you get when you fall in love? A guy with a pin that bursts your bubble. That's what you get for all your trouble. I'll never fall in love again. I'll never fall in love again. What do you get when you kiss a guy? You get enough germs to catch pneumonia. After you do, he'll never phone you. Oh.
Thank you very much. It's quite a challenge to follow a keynote speaker as distinctive as the Senate President, Franklin Drilon, and at the same time have to speak in the midst of a lunch. Just one sec. Will there be a preamble? I was told there was going to be a preamble. Will there be a preamble about me? No. It's okay. Okay, it's fine. Good. Well, I'm going to give this a little bit of a different twist, talking about inclusive growth, but from my perspective as an entrepreneur and as a person who has been in this country for quite a few years.